Welcome to the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. In today's episode, Tim Keefe from Transform CX explores a recent Wall Street Journal study on job satisfaction, highlighting why hybrid and remote workers report higher satisfaction than those returning to the office. This issue impacts employee well-being, company culture, and overall productivity. Tim discusses how companies can better engage with their employees and adapt to the changing work environment. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Everybody, this is Tim Keefe with Transform CX with another SDSS podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. This morning, I want to talk about an interesting study that came out in the Wall Street Journal. It's dated May 6th, this last week, and it comes from a set of surveys that were done around job satisfaction. It was done by the Conference Board Business Research Group, and really leads off with some interesting news, saying that an overall 62.7% of American workers are satisfied with their job. But what's interesting, and this is always so true with these reports, you dig underneath and you start to look at what is happening here, or what at least this one report is saying. And I think it aligns with some of the things that I'm seeing, at least in the conversations we're having with clients as part of our consulting practice and as part of the work we're doing with BalanceWise IQ. One of the big parts here is the disparity that we see between people that are in return to office programs versus hybrid and work at home. And it was really fascinating here. There was this one quote where they were talking about hybrid workers reporting overall job satisfaction in 65.5%. Obviously, that's even better than the overall number. But one of the things was that the people that are getting the highest level of job satisfaction, and I'm looking for the number here, is the people that are working at home full time. And a lot of this is obviously stemming from people had, during the pandemic, 3 years of work at home. And now they see this return to office as actually a penalty in many cases. We're working with a client right now that is going through a return to office program. And it was really interesting. If you think about, normal attrition in the workplace, which, by the way, right now is absolutely huge. I mean, there was a report by Qualtrics in Q1 where across all industries in the United States, attrition during the first year of employment is 47%. That means that for every person you're hiring, one of them is going to quit, or for every 2 people you hire, one of them is going to quit within the first year. And obviously that puts a lot of pressure on the remaining staff, has a big impact on morale, but also at the high cost of now I've got to continue driving this talent acquisition program in a time frame where I'm now competing with potentially employers that can hire from anywhere, which really changes the game. I mean, if you're sitting there and I'm looking at comparable jobs in terms of the work, I'm looking at the work, I'm looking at the benefits, looking at the reputation of the employer, and I've got 2 choices. One is which is return to office, or which means I have to be within 30 minutes, or it's a reasonable commute for me, or I can work in a work at home environment anywhere, and without what is now perceived as the penalty of a commute, of a penalty of incurring all those costs out of pocket. By the way, here in the Bay Area, if you think about just a 30-minute commute and lunch, 1 day a week for 5 days a week, you're probably looking at $15,000 of out-of-pocket expenses to return to the office. And so people then are asking the question, so are you going to compensate me for my commuting costs? Well, of course not. We wouldn't do that. We didn't do that before the pandemic. Why would we do it after the pandemic? Well, for example, we're working with a client I can't name, but during the pandemic, they hired about 15 to 20% new staff. And these people, and especially the ones that joined in 2020, have never worked in the office. And some of them were new to the workforce and had never worked in the office for anybody. And so now they're in 2024 and they're going through a mandated return to office policy, and it's ugly. People are like, oh, are you going to pay for my childcare? Are you going to pay for my commute costs? Are you going to pay? What if I don't like the person in the cube next to me? What am I, can I get a new cubicle location? What if I don't like my cubicle? And it's, all of us would say, well, geez, for years, decades, forever, that was just what it was like at work. But now people learned that it doesn't have to be that way. So again, you've heard me, if you've listened to these before, I tend to lean in on the side of work at home. And I absolutely know that it depends on the individual. It depends on a lot of things. But one thing we are seeing in the work from return to office programs is that, yes, people will do it. If they have no other choice. That's literally what they're saying. I don't have another choice. They're going in and they're badge swiping. We've seen the headlines about people come in and they badge swipe, go up, have a cup of coffee, kill an hour, and then go home, just so that they can get credit for having swiped in for their 2 days a week or 3 days a week in a hybrid work environment. Wow. Well, that's kind of almost a definition of quiet quitting, because now that person probably, instead of working and being productive for that 2.5 hours that they were spending now commuting, going to the office, killing an hour, maybe went to a meeting and leaving and commuting back to their home, they could have been at home being productive the entire time. And then, but on the flip side, I will admit, there are people who are saying, but I don't get that sense of company culture. I don't get that casual engagement with my coworkers. Some of which, by the way, I challenge as whether that was good or not. I mean, my daughter was working here in the Bay Area and for a variety of both, legacy companies and startups. And there was this real happy hour culture, which I have no problems with a happy hour. Believe me, I, did a lot of them when I was younger. But the question nowadays is a happy hour a mandated event? Well, it's part of our company. We're trying to create culture. We're trying to get people to get casually engaged with each other. Yeah, but it's out of hours. And for some people, drinking after work or drinking at all, and then drinking and commuting is very questionable. And is the company sponsoring that? Are they driving that? And, and in my daughter's case, she wasn't a driver and she lived here in the city. So it wasn't, that part of it wasn't a challenge. But for people of her coworkers that were getting in a car and then driving someplace after happy hours, kind of questionable. Again, I'm not trying to get up and make decisions or mandates about what's right or wrong around company culture, but I think we have to also think what's right or wrong around our social responsibility and our responsibility to our employees. So I guess what I'm leaning in here to say is that as we think about the workforce of the future, I think we need to be thinking a lot more about, are we getting the right people with the right skills to do the work that we need done? And more importantly, are they excited about the work? Are you engaged with them to even know if they're excited about the work? And I'm not shilling for our BalanceWise IQ product, but we do listen. The whole point of that product is that you are listening and you're engaging at an emotional level about how people feel about their work. And if you're not doing that, and you can't do that by sending emails. In a virtual environment, there's no problem with, supervisors doing touch bases virtually, doing casual get-togethers. One of the things that my team did over the last couple of months is they had a series of workshops that were done virtually, across multiple time zones, and I wasn't invited. And it was, and I just recently got the feedback this last week from the team. And, like anybody, you kind of like, criticism is rough, right? We don't like it. We don't like to know that we're not perfect. But I will tell you what was very valuable about it is, one, I did get an unfiltered view of things that were doing well and things that were not doing well and need to focus in on and either not do or adjust. But the other piece of it that the feedback I got was how valuable the team thought it was for them to be able to get together, not just to hang out, but to have a productive point. What was the point of them getting together? And the point was to help make the work better, to help get their voice engaged in a conversation about what's working, what's not working, what would they prioritize to make better? Because at the end of the day, that's driving their personal engagement and buy-in to what we're doing. So again, just to summarize, I think whether you're in return to office, a hybrid model, work from home, you've got to pay attention to how people are feeling. You've got to pay attention to what the value proposition is, and just going through the mechanics and having a checkbox mentality of like, oh, they came to the office, that's good. I don't think that's good enough. And I think you're going to have that high attrition. You're going to have the quiet quitting that everybody's complaining about, and it's happening all over the place. So pay attention, try and listen with an open mind, and engage with your employees. Again, thank you very much for listening. This is Tim Keefe, and this is an SDSS podcast.